Saquon Barkley will be the biggest bust in fantasy football this season. I'm going to talk about Barkley and other big name players who you might want to avoid in your fantasy football drafts. And let's start off with the aforementioned Barkley, who's coming off a huge season. Over 2,000 rushing yards, finished second in fantasy points. He was tremendous. But the problem is he had over 370 touches last season. He had over 400 combined carries in the regular season and playoffs. And he also rushed for 2,000 yards. When you look at historical numbers of running backs who've rushed for over 2,000 yards, every single one of them has seen a regression of at least 99 fantasy points the following year. I'm worried about Saquon Barkley, and I'm also worried about Christian McCaffrey. Listen, he's played in 7 or fewer games in 3 of the last 5 years. Last season, he played 4 games and got hurt. And in those 4 games, he only averaged 12 points per game. He's also entering his age 29 season, yet McCaffrey is being picked in the first round. While I understand that he's been an elite player in the past, I am worried about Christian McCaffrey. Drafting him in the first round, folks, just too rich for my blood. Moving on to Tyreek Hill, the Miami Dolphins. Listen, he had a bad year in 2024. His yards per catch average dropped. His receiving extra points added went from 81.3 in 2023 down to 19.9 this past season based on next-gen stats. The fact that the Dolphins traded away Jonnu Smith, clearly a good thing, but you have to wonder, at age 31, is Tyreek Hill still worth a second-round pick? I have my questions about that. Another wide receiver who could be a potential bust is Terry McLaurin. Now, I love him as a player, but there's certainly a few things that have me worried. First, it's the contract situation and the holdout in Commanders camp. And second, he's coming off a career year. He scored almost 270 fantasy points. It's the most he's ever had in the NFL. And he's not young either, at least for a wide receiver. He'll be 30 in September. The Commanders also added Deebo Samuel Sr. into the mix. So I think McLaurin's going to take a step back from a fantasy perspective. I'm also going to say the same thing about T. Higgins. He's a very good receiver, don't get me wrong, but he's being drafted as a wide receiver 13 right now. I get the allure. He plays with Joe Burrow. The Bengals offense is phenomenal, but Higgins will never be an alpha wide receiver. And he's only had 1 year where he's averaged more than 16 points per game. And also keep in mind, he's missed 10 games over the last 2 years due to injury, but he's still being picked in the 3rd round. That's too rich for my blood on T. Higgins. I'm going to pass. A veteran wide receiver who is now at a new address, Davante Adams. And listen, he was great last year. When he went to the Jets, he was the 6th best wide receiver in fantasy football. But at some point, I think the wheels have to fall off, right? I mean, he's 33 years old this December. He's playing in a new offense. Matthew Stafford is having back issues, and Adams won't be the lead wide receiver in Los Angeles. That's Puka Nacua. And the fact that Adams is being drafted as the wide receiver 17 right now is a little bit risky to me. So while I love the talent, he's going to be a Hall of Famer. There's no question about that. I'm worried that regression is coming for Davante Adams, and regression is definitely coming for Jerry Jeudy. Last year, he had a career season. He had 145 targets last year, and he was a target hog in the 7 games where Jameis Winston was the quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. He averaged 10 targets per game. But without him, he averaged 7.6 targets per game, and his fantasy points decreased significantly with any other quarterback than Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston's now in New York, folks, and the Browns quarterback situation is messy at best. So if you're drafting Jerry Jeudy, thinking he could potentially be a wide receiver 2 again this season, you are going to be seriously mistaken. Let's move on to a running back who's had a very good fantasy career, but I think things may be coming to an end, and that's Joe Mixon. When you look at last year, in the first 11 weeks, he was one of the best running backs in fantasy football, averaging 22.6 points per game in those first 11 games. And then the wheels fell off, and his numbers were less than stellar. Let's just put it that way. That's being kind. And now Mixon's dealing with a foot injury that's nagged him all offseason, and we don't even know if he's going to be able to start week 1 as the lead back for the Houston Texans. In fact, they added Nick Chubb and they drafted Woody Marks. So there is big time concern over Joe Mixon. He's being drafted right now as the RB20. It's too high. I would avoid him at that mark. I'd also avoid Aaron Jones Sr. He is coming off one of his best seasons from a fantasy perspective, and he had the most touches he's ever had in a single season at 306. 2 things to worry about with Jones. He's entering his age 30 season, and we all know what happens to running backs. Typically, once they get into that age 30 range, sometimes the wheels fall off. And also, he's going to lose work to Jordan Mason. In fact, this could end up being a 50-50 split with Mason and Jones. And Mason's the younger running back at 26. And Aaron Jones, he is more at risk to get hurt this season than Mason. So this looks like a potential committee situation. Aaron Jones Sr. right now is being drafted as a low-end RB2. I would avoid him at that point, folks. There are better options. In fact, Mason is the better bargain based on ADP. And if you want to dominate your fantasy football draft this season, make sure you check out the SI Fantasy Draft Kit. We've got rankings, sleepers, busts, and everything you need to dominate your fantasy football league.